Good. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Karate Labs, and good morning to you, Prashant. Peter and I have had the pleasure of hosting you before at Star West last year in LA, and it's great to have you back with us. You have been, like the other karate evangelists, a key guide, an important user, and you continue to challenge us. And it's great to have you here with us. The audience is certainly looking forward to listening to you and learning from you. If I may just take a moment of introducing you to the audience, Prashant has had a passion of learning, and he always says the day we stop learning is the day we stop living. He's been leading his life by setting examples, adapting to situations, solving technical challenges. He completed his master's from Southern Methodist University in 2006 and started working at AT&T as a performance test engineer after graduation. His keen eye for detail, efforts towards streamlining automation, and creative problem-solving skills, along with exceptional leadership skills, have earned him several recognitions throughout his career. Seeking the ability to further hone his skill sets, he joined Dell Technologies in 2010 and is currently architecting automation solutions focused on delivery of cloud-based microservices. He's been a crucial driving member of software development transformation efforts and has enabled the success of several test teams within Dell's organization. He loves spending time with his family, road trips, listening to music, photography, volunteering, and fun vacations. So Prashant, welcome once again. And straight off the top, tell us about your journey. What brought you to the world of development and testing? We are all ears.
Thank you, Kapil. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and share whatever I know. So just to, what brought me to the world of development and testing, I think I was always fond of computers in the childhood. And at that time, right, I remember we had computers with big computers, and it was always fascinating, how everything works together, right? And that's where my interest peaked into more of computers and how it works, right? So, but just to from the how I enter into the world of development and testing, and so as you mentioned about my just overview of my experience, right? So throughout my experience, I started working in AT&T as a performance test engineer, and that's where I first actually got exposed to any of the testing, and that's where I was doing more of performance testing and understanding how how it impacts the customers actually, because performance testing is done mostly to understand how's the response time, how's it affecting with this much load and things like that. That actually gave me more understanding of how it affects customers. And that's where the curiosity, I think curiosity is the biggest driving factor to learn anything, and that's where I started learning more about it, right? And when I joined Dell, and that's where I was initially I was in the enterprise server validation team, and that's where I got introduced to more of a pure programming aspect of test automation, because that's where I learned more of Python, because that was one of the language getting used for writing a test automation. And at that time, we were testing embedded server management software. So nothing on UI, and we are not testing a UI, we are testing something in an embedded server management system, right? And that was again a different experience or exposure to how you can write the test automation, right? Where you can control a piece of actually hardware and using different commands and things like that, right? So I think that's where it started working into my mind and giving me more and more interest of learning. And then later I moved into Dell Client Solutions Group, and in about 2017 or so, and we had a homegrown Python framework for client UI testing. And that's where I had experience of testing client desktop applications, and how that was a different experience now, right? Because every product gives you understanding how it works and differently, right? And as you mentioned, in last from 2018 to 2021, I was more of doing automation architect role to provide solutions for testing microservices and web UI and introduction to cloud technologies, right? So that again, right, is the different experience where everybody was getting into cloud technologies and microservices, right? So yeah, that's how that was my experience. I think automation itself, right? It could be a test automation, it could be process automation, and it has been always, new way of doing automation. And now I've changed role to DevOps, and from last 2-3 years, I've been doing more of a DevOps champion role, because at the high level, DevOps is another automation, right? So it's not just it. Well, there's a testing involved also, right? It's a different way of testing. So yeah, that's how I'm into this world of development and testing.
Oh, wonderful. So just a follow-on question. You recently spoke at Star East also, right, Prashant?
Right,
So,
right.
so many years in the world of development and testing, have you seen that there's been a higher degree of maturity now when it comes to test automation, or there is still a degree of manual testing, which is important, of course?
Sure,
What
sure.
would your view on that be, Prashant?
Absolutely. So what I've seen over the last 10 years, right? Initially, at that time, automation was just a word, and it was difficult to do, right? But nowadays, right, I think the team members that I've met, or attendees that I've met in the throughout the experience, right? Uh, they now everybody's aware that automation is important, right? They understand the value of it. Now, whether they're able to do all of them, no, probably not, right? I'm still seeing a lot of folks who are still doing a lot of testing manually, and because of all the complex nature, sometimes because of not enough time to figure out which tools to use. There are a lot of different factors, and based on how the product is. But I think uh, manual testing is still important, right? Right, because that's how you understand the product in and out, and that's how then you can develop your automation based on that, right? So I would say that, yeah, still there are still teams actually in the industry who are still doing manual testing, and they're looking forward to actually what the trend I'm seeing is that they're more eager, or at least inclined towards doing test automation.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. It is a good thing that Peter and I left our day jobs to incorporate Karate Labs, because clearly there is a big opportunity out there, and there's a big responsibility on us to take what Peter's created along with the community and just keep creating awareness. So how did you find karate? What is that? What led you to karate?
Sure. What I was going to say that, right? I think um, in the 2018, right? Again, that's the time actually we started. I actually got tasked with developing, architecting a solution for testing microservices, because that's the first time our org, or at least my team, was responsible to developing the microservices. We were moving away from the monolith, applications, and moving to microservices, and that's where everybody started a journey, right? Development team, and even test team, and even the solution team. Everybody started the journey of moving to microservices, and that's where I was given a task to find a solution for development of the microservices adoption of CI/CD, because that was big movement into DevOps at that time also, right? So we were looking for, so we had specific requirements. I think those requirements drove me to develop multiple POCs, right? Multiple proof of concepts actually. And I had given, like, I think 2 to 3 months of time, and along with my colleague actually, and we developed different POCs actually, right? And we evaluated that against the requirements. We had a basic requirement, right? I'll talk about challenges that mostly what we used to do before, right? Most of the test automation frameworks, they have either homegrown or either somebody off the shelf they have this framework, and then you write the test scripts in that framework, right? And all is stored into a single repository. Now, I had a given task that, okay, we need a requirement, or we need a basically solution where we can test multiple different projects independently, right? Where where we could have testing done independently, right? Because microservices itself, the way we went to microservices, because it's modular in nature. So we were looking for something, obviously something easy to modularize, right? The second most important thing, we had a great set of manual test engineers who had a great product knowledge, right? I think we have a tremendous amount of manual test engineers, right? So I will shout out to all the community who are still manual test engineers. It's great because you have a great knowledge of product knowledge. You know better than anybody how the product works, right? And we didn't want to lose those manual test engineers, right? Because we are moving to test automation, we are going to, everybody's going to, right? I think that's the theme that everybody's moving to. So we wanted to onboard those manual test engineers, right? So that they can actually start writing test automation. But um, we came across a different solution. We came across a solution which is no code, right? Which was very lucrative, right? Okay, you don't have to write any single line of code. You just do this couple of steps and you have the test cases written for you, right? Uh, that was very lucrative. However, right, it was missing a lot of important pieces, which was how do you make reuse the test cases? How do you it was not scalable, right? It was very difficult to add extra functionality, extra checks that we as a test engineer we want to have it, right, for validation. So we wanted to make sure that it's easier to onboard test engineers where there is less code, right? There is a less code needed to write the test cases, especially against the API. And we had requirement of writing test cases which are comprising or hybrid test case. What it means is that where I could do a web UI call where I go to the website, do the transaction, and use the API to check in the backend, hey, did actually that value, what I submitted actually, it was actually, is in the system. So I could do that. If I could do that, that's perfect. Then I don't need two different frameworks. I don't need two different test cases. I could do in a single test case the validation of that, right? The multi-threaded approach. And so we had these specific requirements. Another requirement that it was not probably given by management. I would say it was my personal experience that I introduced is we were looking for something open source. And I would tell you why, right? I'm sure this is probably most of the folks here, right, will agree with, especially the test engineer community, is test engineer or test related anything, right, comes in the last when it's talking about budget, right? So when there is automation, when there is something that you want to develop or you want to buy off, this expensive tools, that comes with very last. Second thing is that with open source, if you have a strong community, you can keep asking for features. You can keep contributing to the features. You can do a lot more different things where, we're looking for that, where, we could have a strong community support, where we could ask for features. And so that was another important piece. And the last piece, again, right, adoption of CI/CD. So we wanted something with easy to execute, easy to adopt, or integrate into the CI/CD, right? So those were all the criteria that we had at that time. And okay, another thing I did talk about reusing the test cases was another important piece, right? Because if you want to achieve the in-sprint automation, you will write probably test cases at the modular level, and then if you want to write a regression test or like end-to-end, then you don't want to write the same thing again or copy paste, right? We want to avoid the duplication as much as possible, because as if, right, everybody is expected industry-wide now, right? With the less resource, do more, I think, right? So we want to make sure that we can take advantage of that, right? So we did POCs. We went through multiple different tools, and Karate. came as the one of the top selection. Uh, and the reason were there was easy to learn. It has its own karate DSL. So that means that each step that I'm writing, I don't have to write a backend code for that, right? It was still following a similar syntax as if like a BDD style, but you don't have to write the step definition for each step. You don't have to maintain another library just for that, right? It was all out of the box. And the reserved keywords were very helpful, especially writing a web UI testing, right? With web UI test cases, writing just pure programming, it's tedious. You have to write so many things differently to handle various situations. And web UI testing was big benefit, because then we could do web UI test scripts along with API, right, in a single test case, and we could use remote web driver. So there are so many features that we were looking for. It was right there, right? And another important thing is that the philosophy that Peter had at that time. I think he wrote one of the blogs somewhere. I don't remember. I stumbled upon it, and what he was saying is that you need to write test cases which are self-contained, which means that the, each test scenario should be able to handle by itself. So you maintain it's not dependent on each other, right? The reason is because that's the easiest way to do modularization and easier way to reuse something, right? Because if you keep writing, keep writing everything in a single big script, test script, and it's very difficult to reuse it, right? So I think, and if you depend on something else, then it gets again trickier to maintain thousands of test cases, right? So I think ability to do the key feature files separate from Karate Runner also helped us, actually me, to develop something. We have a wrapper framework because we are supporting around 15 different project teams, right? So 15 different project teams are developing the code or developing the feature files separately. So I just have a wrapper framework which takes care of the executing Karate Runner. What I just tell that Karate Runner, right, is that, hey, these are the feature files. This is where you want to execute. Okay, go and execute it, right? So I think that those capabilities were available immediately with the Karate, because the way it has developed, right? And so yeah, I think, and second thing is, another thing is Karate tags. And it was very similar to Cucumber tags. People were already familiar with how to use it, right? So I didn't have to educate people, educate team members to on that. It was just easier to, like, okay, if you want this test case to be part of your smoke test, sanity test, regression, or something specific to service, you could do that, right? So I think those are all the different reasons. I'm sure there are other reasons I'm missing out. But yeah, we'll talk about that probably later. But one important thing is that I got connected with karate. I think we started in 2018, so which was like very early phase of karate, like 0.9 dot something version, right? And it was still actively getting developed. So we could ask for features. I remember Peter replying to features like dry run, which we are using extensively, which is easy to execute and find out how many tests is going to run before, without actually executing it, right? So those features gave us uh, ability to do a lot more from a simple tool like karate. So
Oh, awesome. Oh, this is great to hear, Prashant. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing so much detail and the structured way in which you went about evaluating frameworks, right? And it sounds like you spent a lot of time, and finally, thankfully, you selected karate, which
yes.
is a good thing. And one of the questions I had was which features of karate you are using. And I think you've touched upon some of it. I know for
Right.
sure uh, API testing is a given. You're doing UI testing. I know you talked about tags and all that, but there's a lot more in karate, right? For example,
Yeah.
do you use the mocks and performance testing? So could you share a bit about that?
Sure. So we some of the teams started using mock, right? Not all of them are using yet, but in some of the teams are using it. But we are using performance test. So that's another thing I missed while evaluating. We wanted a performance test, and at that time, especially for API testing, right? For API performance test, That was one of the NFRs or requirements that we were given by the management to have that, right? So that we can calculate, how fast and how responsive is the API. And the using a performance test basically was an easier way to introduce or shift left the performance test, because we could just use existing feature file as a performance test, right? So that was a great addition, because then we don't have to write a separate performance test and figure out how to write it. There was some learning curve. I will be honest, right? There was still learning curve of how you write Scala file to write the performance scenario.
Yeah.
But however, you don't have to figure out how you write the actual test, or actual how to execute the actual functionality, because you're already writing in a Karate DSL, right? So you just have to reuse that. So again, that feature helped us to develop or come up with the performance test immediately, right? As soon as you have functional tests available and you feel like, okay, this workflow I want to execute as a performance test, I just have to plug it into the Scala file template. So I designed like a quick templates which anybody can use. Just have to feed in which feature files or which tag you want to execute, and you just run with whatever the scenario you want to, right? So I think that helped us a lot in writing the performance test.
Awesome. Now, I'm trying to get a sense of, I know, and feel free to share within the boundaries of what you can share, but
Sure.
How many folks in the team had to adopt karate? How did you go about that onboarding, right? Getting people to use karate. And you talked a little bit about this. I'm very curious actually about that runner you mentioned, and it sounds like a way for you to have some central piece and then scale your teams to write more functional tests, but
Correct.
talk us through how you managed to roll out karate. How did it go? What were the challenges you faced and so on? And how many people approximately are we talking about, if you can share?
Sure. So let me first share those details, like how many people, and I will not know how many people, but I will know how many projects, right? So right now we have about 15 different projects, and about 12,000 plus API test cases, and about 1,000 plus web UI test cases, right? Because not all teams are having a need for web UI testing. That's why a lot of them are backend, right? So that's just number. So adoption of karate, right? I think it started because, as I said, right, I was given a task to develop or provide a solution so that multiple teams can onboard easily, right? And the wrapper framework that I had, but what it does is it does all the orchestration, right? And basically it's built on the Maven basically. So the Maven has the ability to basically write a custom plugin. So I had actually the wrapper framework as a plugin. And what I do is there in that is that is a separate plugin. There's no test related content.
Right.
It's completely about how, okay, when I say I want to do functional test, I'm going to call the karate runner, basically nothing but the example that you have already, right? Test parallel runner, basically using that and feeding or configuring those, which feature files, which tags, right? Those basically is a configurable option. And if when you want to run performance test, you say that I want to run performance test, and then it picks up the Gatling plugin, right? Because Gatling plugin actually drives that. We're using the karate adapter. And that's how then we run that, right? So as soon as I separate this out, right, where this wrapper framework has all the necessary things to run the karate runner, and where I can feed in another project which has just a feature files, right? This is all 15 projects that I'm talking about. They have their own feature files, they have their own test data, but they don't have anything related to karate as such, right? Because karate runners as such, right? They don't have logic about that. What they have is that karate config.js, they have Java utilities that they want, right? Some wants to connect to Azure, some wants to do JWT creation. So all those different utilities, they're writing in their own repositories. So it's contained in that one repository. The only thing that we are doing is that, okay, the new team comes in, I'm doing microservice testing, and I want to start writing automation tests, right? So what we could do is that we could say that, okay, hey, we have this plugin, right? You just have to create a Maven project, right? And Maven has a great ability to do templating. right, using archetype. So I have archetype basically where I said, okay, it will create a structure as per your needs, right? You want this name, this directory, and it will create a structure with the plugin as one of the dependency, and then you can just start running it, right? So that way it became easier from the day one. Using the templating, we could actually onboard the teams within an hour or so with the basic simple test case, right? And then they will start writing. I think the learning curve was more in terms of just karate DSL, understanding how to write it, and how to, if somebody is new completely. And that's how we could onboard multiple team members. And using this technique, right, we could then integrate into the CI portion, right? So we have our own CI pipeline for the test project. And this is something I would highly recommend everybody, right? When you write the test code, treat it as if that it's the product code. Just like how the product actually goes through a pipeline, a CI pipeline, it goes through all the checks, right? Of whether you have a third-party dependency vulnerability, whether is able to build it, whether you have unit tests that, and believe me, we have teams who are writing unit tests for the Java utilities that they are writing for karate test, right? For example, as I said, creation of JWT, creation of a connection to something, right? Or database or anything. They are writing unit tests for those also. So as part of a build, a CI build for the test automation project, it helped us to shift left as soon, because we could find the issues early on, right? We don't have to wait till we test it actually against the product. We already know ahead of time. And the second thing was that with this CI pipeline, we could now Dockerize. We could build a Docker image. Docker image again for test automation code. And if we can, since we can Dockerize, we can basically put all the environment, the Maven, the Java version, all the necessary things that we need, and the repository, Maven repository. So because we have a private repository, so connection to that. So all those things we can Dockerize easily, and then use that Docker anywhere. And that's one thing I would say that that's the first time when I started evaluating, right? I remember talking to DevOps at that time. I think that was one of the key element, right, or turning point for me to understand how you integrate automation into your CI/CD, right? Because that was one of the requirement. And then to understand from DevOps also, okay, what is the best way for me to run automation? You know what? Especially Kubernetes, right? So best thing to, if you have Docker image, easy, because you control everything. You control the environment of your test automation code, and and it goes to the same CI pipeline. And I think those all concepts I kind of I'll stole from DevOps. Like, okay, you know what? Okay, you're doing that, I'm also doing it, because then it helped us to execute those easily. And then one more thing that we added is that's along the journey, right? In the last couple of years, we added is that, you know what, in the CI pipeline for product, we are testing the product, right? Because we are in the CI pipeline, it goes through their own checks and everything, and then at the end we want to make sure that product is working. How about when I'm going to test our test, right? Especially the golden test cases. I'm sure every team has this golden test cases. You may call it as sanity, you may call it as smoke, right? Which should always pass, especially against a stable environment or stable product, right? Those test cases we didn't want to break because somebody made a test code change, right? So that we can give more confidence to the product development team that, hey, we are giving this test automation code for you to test the product, which has already been tested, right, against the stable, right? So what we did is that we, after the Docker image building and everything, like, let's test it out. Let's make sure that our golden test cases, which runs in like less than 5 minutes, are those passing? Did any test code check-in that you have done by test automation developer, has that been, did it break something from the golden test cases, right? Because we want to make sure that golden test cases always run, because that's our saying that, okay, hey, okay, things are working fine. Okay, I can go forward and do more, regressive style of testing, more in-depth testing. So that helped us to catch the issues early on, whether it's a test code or whether the environment which we were thinking was stable is not stable now because it's continuing. So I think that helped us to onboard the teams, because see, at the end of the day, what development team wants, what test engineer team wants is that confidence, right? Confidence in your quality of the product, that how you're doing it. And that actually helped us to onboard the team members easily on the projects, right? In different projects. I'm going to give you one example, and this is one of the project that initially we onboarded, maybe initially for a second. And this was one of the project which were using API testing. Also, they had a web UI component, right? And they were doing single page applications, right? So single page application, you have multiple screen in the same page, and it depends on how you interact, it will change, right? So we had those kind of situation. Plus, it had a localization, right?
Wow.
So that means that we have support multiple different languages. Now, they had around, I would say around, I think 4,000 plus API test cases and around 500 plus web UI test cases. If you have to execute all of them together, right, using single thread, it would take at least 24 hours plus. The reason is API tests were fast, right? Comparatively fast. They were finished within maybe less than an hour, maybe somewhere about hour, right? Because with the complex workflows that they had, end-to-end scenarios and everything like that. But we wanted to do, say, okay, you know what? We want to run multi-thread. We want to, utilize the cloud resources effectively, and we want to run parallelly as much as possible. So we could do is that we could run using the tags now, right? So we categorize the test cases or test scenarios by the service or by different tags, so that we can segregate like 5,000 test cases into group of 1,000. I'm just giving an example now, right? So 1,000 test cases. So 1,000 cases using the tag, right? So 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. So we could run 5 group of test cases parallelly in a different pods, right? Which when I'm talking about in cloud, we are running in everything in right now in Azure. So in the cloud, we can run in different pods, right? And then we could check if all the API test cases are passing. But you know what? Now it's good time to do web UI. So we could do those easily, and then we could do a web UI, and then we could do localization parallelly. So we could do all this in, we are using Jenkins as this right now. So we could do this all in 8 hours or 8 to 11 hours based on, right? Because web UI was taking more time with the localization and everything, right? So I think we could do that because, again, like I say, right, we can use tags, we can use approach of multi-threading, we can use separately, and then later on, if you want a cumulative test report, you could easily write simple, karate again, right? A small runner code, basically say that, okay, hey, I want to consume all these JSON result files and create a new report, right? And that's where also one thing I didn't mention some time back about dry run. We're using that extensively, because I'm saying is that dry run feature, there is one is the dry run, and second is time-leaf HTML basically reporting. What we could do now is that we could run dry run before before we start testing. So it will tell me, okay, it's going to run 100 test cases, right? And then after the run, I could now compare the actual test with the dry run and say that, okay, hey, how many of the test cases actually really ran, right? Or how many got skipped, how many failed. I could write my own HTML quick report so that I know exactly what happened. More than that, now I could do is that I could run the dry run, or not the dry run, but I think let's say you ran for release 1.1, right? You have your complete regression test results for 1.1. Now I have run against 1.2. Okay, I have results for those also. Now, how do I compare? How do I compare and see that what happened between this and this? The good thing about the HTML template in time-leaf, right, is that I could actually write a small custom code, say that, okay, hey, you know what? This is the result directory for 1.1. This is the result directory for 1.2, maybe 1.3. And I can say, okay, you know what? Compare these two, right? And give me a chart of test cases for 1.1 which passed, 1.2 which did not pass, or whatever, right? So you could do that easily with the HTML templating.
Yeah,
And that was a big saver, actually. So
yeah, you know what? It just struck me. In fact, I finally understand, Prashant, why you were so keen on getting that dry run, right? Because now totally makes sense once I got the background that you really rely on tags so much. It's a way for you to partition tests, even run it on
right,
different pods, which, you know what, I'm going to have an offline conversation with you to understand more about that.
sure.
Um, did I hear you right? You said 8 hours to actually run your test suites, right? Is that the average size we are talking about? Does that include API and UI? What's that? What's that going on?
Right. So the 8 hours which I told, right, is basically 8 to 11 hours. That's for one of the project, right, which were more complex one, which we're doing API testing, which we're doing in a, and then because we have a gate, right, basically saying that, okay, if the API test pass and the, total passing rate is about 90%, then you do web UI testing, because
Got
there is
it.
no point. If the backend is not working, then what's the point of doing web UI testing? Then
And
you do web UI testing, and then web UI testing with the single language right now, this English language. And then after that, those are passed. Okay, let's do localization. Localization, we had around 10 to 12 languages, right? So this is for regression. This is not something running every day, right? This is something running once in a or once in a sprint or twice in a
that makes
sprint,
sense.
like
Right.
that, right? So, and then this is more of a holistic regression. Mostly we were running um, about the all the test cases like a like a smoke, right? A little bit more than smoke. Everybody names differently, but we were having regularly around I would say less than 30 minutes of testing, right? If
Got it.
web UI is there, then maybe a little more, but less than 30 minutes, we are trying to make sure that we test it. One thing I did forget, the CI pipeline that I was talking about for the test project, right? Now we version every test project when it goes through this CI pipeline. What's the point, right? At the end of the day, right, the test project that or tests the feature files that you're writing, once you know that those are working, what's the point of saying that, okay, you know what, you continue to make check-ins, right? And then you have you're using that same test code in the product pipeline, saying that, okay, I want to run this test, but there was somebody checked in something, right, which broke it. And so we want to make sure that we have the gates for that. So we version everything or every test project. That way we can tell the development team, or we can automate the process, saying that, okay, for development pipeline, when they're running their test, right, they use this version, because we know that this version we have tested it. We make sure that the golden test cases are at least working, making sure that the basic things are working, right? So so that also helped us to reduce some of the the flakiness of the
No, that's awesome, man. I can clearly see, a lot of your DevOps thinking and passion going
yeah.
through all of these things. And so that's like great.
Right.
Just one question on the UI test, and I'm really curious. Now, you certainly have a lot of UI tests, and it's in your interest to run them in parallel, and you seem to be doing a good job of running those tests in parallel. Are you managing all of this? Because, from my understanding, running UI tests in parallel requires you to have some grid or cluster, or
Correct.
use some external cloud
Correct.
provider. Right? So what are you folks doing? Just curious if you can share.
Sure. So we were using for a long time open source, again, Selenium, right?
Selenium.
And Selenium as Selenium Grid. And however, now it's not getting maintained. And so we are now actually, some teams are using Sauce Labs, some teams are using different, so they are using different remote grids. The good part about is that since the way the Karate was developed, right, I could just give the hub URL, and as long as it has the same capability as another grids, and I just provide right capabilities, it runs, right? So I think right now the way it is it's configurable. So based on the team's budget, right, whether they have a license for Sauce, whether they have a license for any of the different grids, they are actually using that. So that's the only way we could do running parallelly. Otherwise, it was not possible to run parallelly.
Oh, good. And of course, when there was a point in time you used Selenium, right? And obviously you were able to provision servers on your cloud or all, you managed
Correct.
that. That's awesome. I mean, it's good to know that that's an option for some teams. Just wanted to highlight that. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And the good part was that if somebody wants to do it quickly, something locally, right? Because not everybody has access to
Yeah,
the
exactly.
production version of grid, right? Selenium gives that easier way. And I understand still has older version of Chrome, but at least it gives you quick way to something check if you want to run it locally.
Great.
Oh, wonderful. In fact, I want to go, but thanks for that, Prashant. In fact, offline, we'll also share with you. Recently, we had a meeting with an enterprise customer, and they showed how beautifully they are using Karate along with Sauce Labs. And it was now we use that as a demo also because we set it up ourselves. But one question, you've been talking about onboarding, and you did cover a good point on that. Not sure if you or your team have experienced our official plugins, the IntelliJ and the Visual Studio Code plugin. My question to you is that if you go back in time and if the plugins were there, do you think it would have made the onboarding much easier?
I would say definitely, right? If I had to start over, if I were given a chance right now to, like, if I didn't know anything that what happened in the past, right? Obviously, the plugins would give the easier onboarding experience, right? There are a lot of things that I had to develop in the, I would say, wrapper framework to support those kind of some of the things, right? Which are already taken care of by now plugins. We're right now not using as much, right? There are only personal people who wants to try it out. They're trying it out. But I think if I had to start over, I think I would definitely try out the plugins because that will give you immediate, onboarding experience, because then you have access to, easy to debug, easy to find out what keywords to use, right? There are a lot of different, and there are a lot of already free features that are available in plugins. You should just immediately try it out and see what works with you. One thing I'm going to tell you honestly, right? So I was part of the journey of developing the solutions for the teams, right? I was probably not involved that much into writing the actual test cases. So I will give all the credit to all my team members who figured out, how they write the test cases. The Karate has a capability. That's how they were able to do reusability. That's how they were able to do multiple taggings. They were able to segregate, and all those things, right? Ideas that the assertion, all the things that are there in Karate helps them to do those effectively, right? So now the manual test engineer that I was talking about, right? I think we about had, I think in my team, we had around 4 to 5, I think. All of them are right now us doing automation, right? Using Karate, right? Because they could do that. And writing a small Java utility, small JavaScript, they're able to figure out, because I think it's just about confidence. Once you get the confidence that you can write a test case or automate a test case, writing a small JavaScript, small Java utility is easier. And then if you cannot, you can always get help on that, right? But majority of the writing of test cases, feature files are now easier with the Karate DSL.
It's if I may, in my early days when Peter invited me to be part of this wonderful journey, I've been in meetings where there are senior QA, professionals who have actually looked at Peter and said that I never knew programming, but thanks to Karate, not only did I learn programming, that's one. Second, I didn't feel intimidated. And two, now I enjoy programming. And there are some of them who have advanced to even using Karate's API mocks features so extensively that it is hard to believe that they were not into programming before. It's just absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that. So one question, given a chance, what more would you like to see in Karate?
Sure. So I think I did touch base about, so initially the requirement that we had was more for the API performance testing. This is, again, I'm talking about 4 years back, right? Where we are still, at least my team was new to microservices and everything. So we thought of API, so that's good. But now with the things getting more complex in nature, the solutions and everything, right? Because we have more capabilities with the microservices. There's a need for now, I think, web UI performance testing. I think I tried it. It did not really work the way I wanted to work. So I think there is a possibility of enabling that option, so that maybe using Gatling, maybe using something else. So I think web UI performance testing is one of the need I think we could do. The other thing is that I think I did tell you about that some of the projects that are using Karate, right? They have very complex tests. The reason is because they have a complex workflows, right? So they are, and since the reusability component is there, the team is using more extensively so more nested approach of reusing the feature files. When you do multi-threading, right, we run into sometimes Java heap size issues, right? And imagine, right, since we are running this in cloud, right, everything is resource constrained, right? So it's not like you have a big server. So right now we are using local servers right now for doing a large performance tests like heavy load. And there is I know Karate has the capability of doing distributed performance testing. We just need to probably get more examples how exactly you would do it. How do you integrate properly? Maybe figure out a way to avoid just Java heap size issue sometimes when there is a complex test are there. I understand it's not just Karate's responsibility. I think it's as a community we need to work together and figure out what is the best practices. When you write something, and you need to start writing or developing these best practices when it comes to large amount of test cases or complex test cases. And the second feature that everybody's right now looking for, I think, right, everybody's looking for is that, okay, I as an automation developer or test developer for Karate, I know how to write the test cases. I can read the test case and understand what's happening, right? But if somebody asks me, especially let's say a product owner or somebody asks me, okay, can you just tell me what are you testing, right? Well, I can go and explain them, okay, this test is doing this. I could write the manual test case and then convert it into. Right now we are in the era of in-sprint automation. We probably don't have enough time to do both things. Sometimes we have to do it because to help understand others what we are testing, how we are testing. So we could probably have something like test collateral generation based on docstring. We could introduce a feature maybe in the, when writing a test cases, you can say that, what this step doing or what this test case doing, right? Maybe embed the docstring there so that as a part of your maybe CI pipeline or part of somebody asking you, okay, can you just give me whole your test, what test cases you're writing for this features? Because what we do is that since the test cases are written in Jira right now, we add a tag for that too when we write the test scenario, so that if I want to know for this feature, and for the feature level, we write for the feature, right? Like this is the feature tag. And we can say, okay, for this feature, how many test cases you have? Okay, I can just run dry run, right? Dry run again gives me that capability to, okay, give me the throughout report right now saying, okay, how many test cases are written for this feature? The problem is we know that the number is there, 10, but we don't know what's happening inside of it, right? So as a developer, I know, product owner doesn't know. So if we have this feature, imagine that we have this beautiful HTML report where it says that, okay, you can drill down, say, okay, this test case is there. Okay, what steps is executing? At least at the high level, we know that, okay, this is what is executing. And imagine the documentation moves from the test management tool to your code now, right? Because when you're changing the code, if it going to the pull request, you can make sure that docstring is also getting updated because you're making a change right now, right? So I think that that will give more sophistication, more easier access to or easier confidence, basically, right, for test team, so that they know that exactly what they're doing, right? Other teams also know what they're doing, or development team, they want to know how we're testing it. Okay, these are the steps we're taking, right? So I think that there are these two, I think I would say is more will be beneficial.
No, wonderful. No, thank you for that. We do, you said on, many customers have asked us in the last 16, 17 months that we have met customers on parallel testing for UI.
Right.
Performance testing, I beg your pardon, for UI.
Yeah.
But the jury's still out on that, because today we are seeing, it's that balance of, there's a huge ecosystem of our respected peers in the industry that have invested heavily on UI test automation. Okay.
Right.
And the origin of karate, and where we are exceptionally differentiated, is, yes, we are a unified open source test automation platform that brings API testing, API performance, API mocks, and UI testing together. But the crown jewel and the differentiator is API testing. Okay. And so that balance. So your point is well taken, and thank you so much for that. One last question. We know that you listen to music, you photography, but what else do you do in your free time when you don't have open source companies troubling you to have webinars and sharing your journey? What else do you do in your free time, Prashant?
Well, obviously, spending time with my 8-year-old twins, and obviously my wife, right? So spending time with them, and that's where, I said, right, road trips, beach vacations, they enjoy, we enjoy it together. Other thing is that I do find opportunity to make new friends, and that's the reason I, when I, get an opportunity to talk to somebody, I think that's because I think you get to different perspectives, right? I think there is philosophy behind that, because that again, I'll apply to this, solution that you're looking for as a software testing community, right? Not everything will work the way that you want, right? So you'll have to figure out what works for you, right? And just because it's working for somebody else may not necessarily will work exactly the same way. So you'll have to figure out what works for you and how you make it work for, and I'll give one, I think message, right? I think the mindset and collaboration, right, gave me a lot more understanding of how to develop a solution. Because if you don't collaborate, because I've seen a lot of teams works in silos, and I think that's where I was. And believe me, I was the one person also in that, right? When I realized, you know what? Yeah, I'm working. I only know this much, right? And I'm very good at this, right? But there are more other out there, right? So I think expanding that horizon will obviously help. The other thing helped me also is volunteering. And again, right, if you see this, right, all these are opportunities for me to meet new people. Actually, that's the only driving factor, so that it's easier for me to, understand different perspectives. Yeah.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much for this, Prashant. I'll pause. Not a single one of the attendees dropped out in the last 1 hour, just FYI. So
Okay,
been very, very captivating. So thank you so much for that. We'll pause and throw the floor open for any questions. And if anybody raises their hands, we can even give you the forum to just speak and ask the question. So anyone? Very, very compelling enough. I have one question. Do you think you're on the right path as Karate Labs to create and spread the awareness of karate? And what more do you think we should be doing in addition to these customer journey webinars? Any other thoughts?
Well, so before Karate Labs became before the karate becomes Karate Labs, right? I think Peter and some other contributors were the listeners of all the community, right, who are using it. And the good thing that you're doing now is that since you're dedicating time, I think you're listening to the customers, right? Listening to who are using it. And one of the things you're already doing it is making easier for onboarding teams to karate. I think that's where you're already taking care of. I think I've seen the plugins that how it makes a difference, right? I think so those all things are already, you're taking care of it. So I think just awareness is the only one thing we need to, I feel like, Karate Labs needs to focus on.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for that. We have taken a lot of your feedback on board over the last few months. We are launching a brand new website in the next few weeks. I know one day you gave us very critical feedback even on our pricing page, that you will be it'll be very pleasing for your eyes and for the others, Prashant, on the change it is undergoing. We have a question from Abhishek Vera. Hi, Abhishek. Great to see you again. Is the karate framework used organization wide? Are there any other teams, departments that got inspired by it? Curious to know how Dell considers karate against other JavaScript based framework.
Sure. Yeah, I'll have to answer to some extent for sure. Is first thing is that so at that time when I started, right, I had only one or two projects, and those two projects we onboarded with karate, and so right now it's a choice, right? It's a choice that that the teams have now to use, right? I think so. I would not say that it's used across Dell. Dell is such a big company, so I'm not going to talk on behalf of complete Dell whether it as a Dell as a Dell whole is using karate, right? So I will be I don't think it's going to be possible to do that. So right now in the org wide, yes, I think the teams that are doing most of the cloud testing, right? I would say again, cloud testing is mostly using it, right? I think and the teams that got inspired were the rest of the 12 or 13 teams that basically are using it. So right now, as I said, there are 15 different projects, and I think they're using karate, and but it doesn't cover the whole org. I understand there are different JavaScript based frameworks. We had one before, and before we started API onboarding journey, we had I think the Chai Mocha and those kind of JavaScript framework. The challenge again with that, right? I think you have to know a lot more about how you write the test cases, right? There is a lot more programming involved. And I think that's the reason we were looking for something with the DSL where it's easier to write anybody to write quickly, right? So I think that's how karate is getting used. And yeah, I think the teams that I said 15 again, right? Those were all, well, out of those, two were my team, right? Two projects from my team. The rest of them from the other teams.
Excellent. And Abhishek, thanks for asking that question, because it just shows that the opportunity karate has. And Prashant, to your team, the shout out that you gave to your team, the actual testers who have scaled karate, please tell them to keep spreading the word of karate, of course, within Dell and outside of Dell also. And now that we have incorporated Karate Labs, our aspiration and ambition also is to have, we have such big users, SAP, we have users, small, medium, and large companies, okay, and large. And our ambition is to, of course, continue scaling the use of karate across teams. So yes, please keep spreading, request your team to keep spreading the awareness. Abhishek has kindly offered, probably can refer your work to some of my friends at Dell struggling with Java-based framework, take inspiration. Wonderful. Thanks for that, Abhishek. Prashant is always open to new ideas and recommendations. You can always reach out to him. Andy, thank you so much for your comment on Stack Overflow. Peter's exceptionally passionate about it. In fact, the new website that we are launching, we've debated a lot. Peter and I had lots of arguments on should we have a FAQ section, etc. And then ultimately we decided, you know what, we'll just have a link on Q&A regarding karate. It just takes to the tag questions on Stack Overflow, because over the last 6 years, it's a wonderful repository of everything to do with karate. And we encourage teams that are onboarding karate using our plugins. When you have doubts, use Stack Overflow as the first point of reference. And if anything, please post there or reach out to us. And as always, have you seen, we are very quick to respond. Prashant, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. There's one question that's come in. One question regarding cloud. Andy, have you implemented karate automation in a serverless way? Do you have any suggestions?
So as I said, right, I think when I started the journey, right, with karate, I was very always in sync with what DevOps is recommending. And so I think that's where I got to understand that if you put everything in Docker, as long as you can Dockerize the whole thing with the environment, whatever you want, you could run easily, right? There you don't need a server, right? You can just run in the cloud, and that's how we are running it pretty much. Most of the teams actually running it. Some teams are running locally because of some network restrictions and things like that. But otherwise, yeah, just Dockerize your container, Dockerize your test and everything with the Karate, and it's easier to do that way. And I believe Peter has already have a Docker image, right, which could use. So I haven't got into that yet. I think when I started the journey, I don't think at that time it was there. So we just developed our own with the wrapper framework that I had, right? So that's the reason I had to do that. But take a look at that, and I would say that that's the easiest way to run the automation if you want to, because then you don't depend on anybody, right? You exactly know what is in that Docker image, and when you run it, it's predictable. I think make sure you have a predictable model. I think that's the easiest way to say that, okay, I know my environment is correct because I exactly know what version of Maven, Java, because we are running right now JDK 17, Maven 391. So and means we don't have to tell DevOps that, okay, make sure you have this agent, make sure you have this, with this version. We don't have to. We just have to tell that, okay, hey, this is the image. We just want to run it.
Prashant, one question, since it's not a hard stop, and it's a cheeky one, and I'll put you on the hot seat here. In addition to everything you said, Karate can do better.
Yeah.
If we were to throw this at you for native features built into Karate or published integrations with Karate, what would you jump out at? gRPC, Kafka, published integrations for X-Ray and Zephyr, and finally, Karate offering the ability to developers to explore APIs.
Yes, I would say yes to all. Plus, I would say that integration with, so if you're not like me, where you're writing a wrapper framework or anything, but you just want to use out of the box Karate, right? There is a Docker image, as I said, but I think integration with maybe Jenkins, because that's widely getting used by all the teams, right? So maybe having a plugin for Jenkins, maybe as part of, so what my team right now we are switching from, for CD portion, we are switching from Jenkins to something called Argo projects. And the Argo has a way to, or any, basically, or maybe a Helm chart, right? A way to deploy your Karate test. And there are ways actually we can, integrate easily with CI/CD. If that's your goal, if you're already mature to that level, yes, right? I think what I'm seeing is that, again, from last conference that I went to, right, I'm still finding people, right, who are not closer to even doing CI/CD. Right now, they're struggling to get to the automation maturity level, right, where they're able to do automation. And so, yeah, I think that's what I will say.
No, wonderful. So in a nutshell, the reason I asked that also is, Prashant, we get a lot of feedback on what more needs to be built into Karate, and we take it on board very seriously. But we also know that we are a responsible for-profit open source company, and we need to keep the needle moving in terms of adoption. And a lot of the enterprise users who are extensive users of Karate have been asking for published integrations with X-Ray, Zephyr, and now, like you said, Jenkins, and few others, like, hey, can you also have something to do with test data generation? So that's why I asked that question. But thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Peter, any parting comments or?
No, I was just typing in the chat some thoughts on serverless. You can
want to speak of it. The audience is still on the.
I think Prashant will be happy to hear this. One, in terms of serverless for Karate API tests, I think it's not needed, because the way API tests work in Karate, the world of Karate, is that you just bring up one node. It might be a Jenkins node or a Jenkins node. It runs a test. It just takes 5 minutes and you're done. Okay. That said, Prashant, I feel if we combine Chrome headless, and those of you connected to the whole web automation industry may know that Chrome has actually cleaned up the way headless works. It's supposed to be a lot more closer to real Chrome than earlier. There were some issues in the past. So I feel that if you combine Chrome headless and AWS Lambda, you might be able to achieve this okay, spin up, 1,000 user sessions using Chrome, hit your server, and Prashant, you'll be very happy when that happens.
Right. Yeah. It's just that I think we'll have to choose a cloud agnostic solution. But yes, I think it's you're right. We just have to, whatever the cloud provider you're using.
Yeah, any
But
serverless node that can
correct.
Chrome headless. Absolutely.
Correct. Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much from Peter, myself, and Garade Labs, Prashant. We thank our audience. Thank you so much for your time. We know that our days are busy, so you taking this hour aside and being part of this means a lot to us. Prashant, thank you so very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.